Ralph McInerny came into the classroom always dressed very debonairly, and his hair was always immaculate. And he came in and he prayed the Our Father in Latin, Pater Noster. Ralph would then start teaching. I've been speaking to St. Thomas Aquinas. He shared some ideas with me. I'm going to give you a sort of version that I think you can appreciate and understand.
He taught it as the reason to be studying this material is because it actually helps us to think about the world now. Not treating it like, well, this is just something somebody said in the 13th century. For him, it was always, well, why would you read this if you didn't think it had some value to what you're doing now and what you're thinking about the world now?
It made a big difference to me, how we read these texts and what the arguments were. It seemed like the most important thing in the world. It seemed like the most important thing for human beings to do. Right, because you wouldn't want to get to the end of your life and be sitting there and saying, did I live a good life? Right? Sort of like walking through life in a kind of haze, walking through life in a kind of half-awake state.
Ralph McInerny was the first person I met who was so broadly educated. He was a brilliant writer. He was a poet.
He has this great book. It's about Thomas Aquinas, and the subtitle of the book is A Guidebook for Peeping Thomists. And I mean, there's a joke, and it's kind of a bad pun, but it shows a sort of a sense of humor, and I think his good nature. And I think that sort of thing, makes, sort of very intimidating intellectual figures like St. Thomas Aquinas more available to readers who might be intimidated just picking up a giant book like the Summa Theologica.
Ralph saw that he had a particular responsibility for keeping a whole intellectual tradition alive and sharing it with folks.
He said he'd been at this meeting and there are all these great people, and he had had the thought, what if he could go start his own Catholic university and have all these people at it?
The idea of a university based on Thomist thinking, where there's a unity of thought, things have their place, you give students a way of thinking that helps them understand God, reality, nature, Christian morality and ethics. That's what McInerny promised.
A university is chiefly and principally concerned with the mind and the imagination. And what a Catholic university ought to do is to show the influence of the faith on the works of the imagination and the works of the mind.
You get these great teachers, and you get a sort of connection to these great teachers. So it's not just, I read Aristotle, but I read Aristotle with Ralph McInerny.
The writers, the thinkers, the artists were animated by their religious faith. So if you had any doubt as to whether or not religious belief is relevant to these endeavors, the endeavors of the imagination and of the mind, all one need do is look at Western civilization.